Well, good morning and welcome to Mirador Television. A little bit of adjustment required there, I think. Yes, that's it. That's better. I seem to be centre page now. I'm Keith Hayes. This is Mirador Television, broadcasting out of the White Hart Hotel in Lewes, in East Sussex, in the great land of the United Kingdom. And we are esoteric, quirky, sometimes funny, sometimes serious, sometimes we piss people off. But we try to cover the whole spectrum. And we normally start, as we are going to today, by looking at the newspaper headlines. And they're almost much of a muchness today. The rather charismatic and daring, and from comedian to statesman, President Zalensky unexpectedly turned up in London yesterday and spoke to the House of Commons and met King Charles and heaped praise on Boris for giving him support. This man is obviously a charmer, and he got a lot of people going. But after charming, he turned around and said, "Look, I want all your airplanes, or as many of them as you can give us." And so the newspapers this morning have followed his diktat, and they have said they follow the theme. And what they're saying is, give us wings for freedom. That's the Daily Telegraph. Zalensky, a surprise visit to the United Kingdom and his appeal for fighters jets lead most of the papers today. Rishi Sunak has laid the groundwork for Britain to send aircraft to Ukraine. And the paper says the Ukrainian leader made an appeal for help while addressing MPs and peers in Westminster Hall before visiting King Charles at Buckingham Palace. Westminster Hall, very historic. You get a remarkable feeling of history there. A few people could be condemned to death over the years, and of course it was the original parliament. The Guardian, give us wings. Zelensky calls for UK fighter jets in an historic address. And the Guardian says the Ukrainian president delivered an emotional appeal to the UK during his visit. The paper says the Prime Minister was previously opposed to giving over UK jets, but he has now ordered a Defence Ministry review into whether the request could be met. Both leaders visited a military facility in Dorset during Mr. Zelensky's visit, the paper reports. The Times, give us wings for freedom. Zelensky addresses MPs and meets the king in a historic British visit. The warrior was met with feral cheers, says the Times. And during his plea for combat aircraft, President Zelensky said he understood how Winston Churchill had felt during World War II. The paper says the Ukrainian leader also presented Sir Lindsay Hoyle, Speaker of the Commons, with the helmet of a fighter pilot. On it, the fighter pilot had written, "We have freedom. Give us wings to protect it." Aha! Oh, they got all the tricks of the trade. The Metro. It says UK, and then a picture of the Union Jack and rain, Ukraine making. Zelensky meets the king on a historic visit to thank Britain. He makes a plea for fighter jets and praises Boris for support. And he addressed both houses of parliament in Westminster Hall and thanked Britain for its support. The paper says Ukraine's leader also thanked former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who had got others to react when it seemed absolutely impossible. The Daily Express. It has a big picture of the earthquake on the front page. With a lady standing in the middle of it. The dead are wrapped up in the very blankets they lay under as the earthquake did its merciless worst. But the Express still goes along with Zelensky and the jets, and sends Zelensky all our jets. Boris has said, give them a lot. It was time for Ukraine to get exactly what it needs. As he ramped up pressure on Sunak, and he had formed a close relationship with Zelensky, which he also, when he was in number 10, and he begged for best single use for British Typhoon combat jets was in Ukraine. The paper also features a picture of the damage in Turkey following an earthquake. Yes, we mentioned that. The Sun. He says, shows Zelensky shaking hands with King Charles and says, "Thanks for the tea. Now give me your jets." The Sun features a picture of Zelensky shaking hands with King Charles during the meeting at Buckingham Palace, where they shared tea. And during his visit to the UK, the Ukrainian leader pleaded for powerful English planes to help defeat Russian President Vladimir Putin and protect his country's freedom. The Daily Mail, it has a little bit in the banner at the top about Nicola, the lady who's drowned. We think is drowned. But then the main story is, now give him wings he needs for freedom. And the Mail carries on the theme. Now give him wings for he needs for freedom, says the Mail. It says Mr. Zelensky praised the UK on Wednesday, saying it had stood with Kiev since day one. It also features Zelensky with Sunak before they left London in a helicopter. That is to visit the arms factory, I think. The Eye. The UK warns Putin, we may send fighter jets to protect Ukraine. Now, that's a slightly different angle. Yes, we may, as opposed to the much more positive sounding words on the other newspapers. The Prime Minister has said nothing is off the table as the UK is considering sending Typhoons to Ukraine following Mr. Zelensky's visit. The UK has warned Mr. Putin that it might send planes to protect Ukraine, while the Russian embassy says the move would have consequences for the entire European continent. It's hotting up. It's hotting up. The Daily Mirror. Give us your wings of freedom, the Ukrainian president says. Same theme. Financial Times says it goes on a financial scandal, but even it has a picture of Zalensky in Westminster Hall addressing both houses of Parliament. The Daily Star. You greedy bastards, it says on the front page. Order of the Waziks. Now this, now this is, thank goodness somebody is keeping an eye on other things other than the war and the earthquake, because it appears that the MPs have put forward a motion, and it says that when they lose their seat, that they get £162,000 payment, and also a medal to say that they've served. Now, this is the sort of thing that just shows how far out of touch they are. Now, they love each other, right? They love what they're doing, to the extent where they forget everybody else. They choose to go into what could be a temporary job, and when it ends, for whatever reason, they should leave gracefully. Nobody else gets a payment. Nobody else gets a medal. And if you try to tell me that the lot we've got in Westminster at the moment are serving, then I'll tell you, you've got a fight on your hands. Biggest bunch of losers that we've had ever in charge. Now, I'm not saying that we wouldn't get good governments, and we haven't had good governments in the past. They didn't ask for a medal. They didn't ask for extra money. This lot are very typical of what's going on in the country. Money has become king. And not only that, it's become a frightening king, because actually the government will not think in any terms of reforming the nastier sides of the financial industry. And so it plows on. It plows on, making huge, obscene profits while withdrawing more and more services and finding all sorts of silly reasons as to why, until it's become patently obvious that all they are is a money-barreling machine for themselves. And does this government do anything about it, or even raise a whimper? No, they do not. And why? Because they're scared silly of the financial sector. Let's get some people with courage. Let's get some people with talent. Let's get some people of merit in this institution, in this building, instead of the weak-kneed, self-serving, chase the buck bunch we've got at the moment. It's vitally important. It's vitally important that we're well governed. And it's frightening that we've got the lot that we have, to be quite honest with you. Totally out of touch. Totally out of touch. Now, just looking at one or two things locally. Oh, come on. There we go. Today's highlights. A man has been arrested in the little town of Battle, the very picturesque town of Battle in East Sussex. And apparently there was a stabbing in a 38-year-old man has been arrested following a stabbing in Battle. Officers cordoned off part of Old Ladies Court, just off Battle High Street, following an incident at around 10:30 on Tuesday evening. Tuesday morning, sorry. Police say the 21-year-old man from Battle suffered a serious leg injury. He's now been discharged. He's not life-threatening. But officers conducted an investigation throughout the day and this morning, February the 8th, and it's, February the 8th, arresting a 38-year-old man from Bexhill on suspicion of inflicting grievous bodily harm with intent. He remains in police custody at this time. Now, that's one of those things that really starts to show the problems that we've got post-Brexit. No, not post-Brexit, post-lockdown. We are finding more and more incidents of violence in the streets. And all we've got is a bunch of coppers who have been smirching the name of what was once a very fine reputation of our police. And excuse me. Anyway, another one is safeguarding ineffective. As Rusper Primary School is rated inadequate by Ofsted. Rusper has been downgraded from good to inadequate following a recent inspection. The inspection was carried out by Ofsted, a government department responsible for ensuring school standards are maintained. I'm not 100% sure where this school is. Those who know the geography will know where Rusper is, but it's it looks to be, one of those pretty villages that scatter this entire southern coast. Let's see, is there anything else of note locally? Not really. Plans for a new 57 million secondary school have moved forward. Apparently this school is carbon friendly. Sussex drink drivers are caught and are named and shamed. That's basically the stuff that's happening in the last 24 hours. So not a huge amount of serious local stuff. It is if you're sitting next to it, of course, but in the wider context, not so. All right. There we go. My beautiful face on the screen again. Ha ha ha. But let me tell you what we're going to do in about 4 or 5 minutes after I've had my little rant. We're going to take a half an hour break, and then we shall show episode 3 of our documentary, The Bloody Past of a Tiny Town. And after that, we have The Alternative View with Liza Page to give her view on what's happening in the world. It's controversial. Some people poo-poo her. Some people say yay. Other people say how interesting. The one thing that we do on this television station is make sure that all viewpoints are heard. Well, we don't deliberately go and get people to try and do balance the way that a lot of people do it. Somebody wants to express their view, as long as it's not obscene or libelous, we make space. We make elbow room. Now, let me just follow on from what I said about the banks. And for that matter, the credit card companies, the financial sector is, we hear our leaders yelling about the mental state of people, yelling about what lockdown had an effect. Does anybody bother to check the financial sector? No. And actually, I have to say, it's time for us to start to wage war against American Express, foreign company governed from a foreign, governed from a foreign country, uses foreign tactics. I've had calls on a Sunday night. I've had calls on public holidays. And all for what? Because the miscalculation is I had £23 deficit. That is not good enough. And if this company doesn't get its act together, then I'm afraid that we're going to have to start to try and get it out of this country. Now, it's easy in passionate moments. It's easy when you actually yell and scream and say this should be done and that should be done, to ignore some of the consequences. But this company has gone beyond the pale. And its bullying tactics are totally out of character with what our leaders say. Oh, yeah, they say they don't want. Protect the vulnerable. Make sure that we are adequately providing for mental health. And yet we allow these people to bang on, using their computers, of course. Oh, everybody knows how I feel about computers. We don't start to control them. They are going to take over. And there are a number of people that are beginning to worry about that. Those that understand better what computers can do and can't do. They've certainly taken over the financial services industry. There is a big reform cleanup required in that sector. And until we actually get some awareness at the top of what's going on, it ain't going to happen. And all the cards on the side of the banks and the credit card companies and the finance companies, they behave as if nothing has happened, as if life hasn't changed. And it is not good enough. It is not good enough. It needs to come under scrutiny. Safeguards need to be put in. And if we're not going to put them in, then don't boast. Don't stride with your little feet in Westminster telling us what a wonderful job you're doing in trying hard to protect us. Because you're not. You're not even aware of it. You're not aware of much anything, actually. Except, oh dear, we might lose our job in 2 years' time, or 18 months' time. So what we think we should do is have £162,000 in our pocket when we leave. Well, I'll tell you, every time I go out of this door, from this television station, hoping that I'll come back, but if I don't get a brass penny. Do we have brass pennies? I don't get a cent. Not one tiny little farthing. I have to fend for myself. I think it's time that you stood up and started to fend for yourself instead of being the weak-kneed Nellies that you are, giving way to almost every pressure that is put on you, changing your leader once every 2 or 3 weeks as if it's a suit of clothes. having no sense of duty except to yourselves. It is not good enough. And it is time for change, for reform. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that our basic form of governance isn't reasonably good, but it's outdated. And it's got a bunch of people in charge who care nothing for systems, who care nothing for a sense of duty. All they care about is how much money they're going to get and what sort of privileges can they pile on one another. And by golly, here's a list of the privileges you've got, some you may not know about, and use them. It is not good enough. The financial sector and the governance sector are both as bad as one another. In history, it's easy to see why you had insurrection. I'm not advocating that, by the way. But it is easy to see when people who essentially are what make up our lives, our communities, when they've had enough, when they're at a breaking point, they force change. Whereas our leaders should be looking ahead and realizing what's happening and effect change, effect decent change, honest change, implement policies and ideas that will keep sectors that are traditionally greedy and mean and miserable on the straight and narrow, but mostly demonstrate to us, your constituents, that you're really not greedy and grubby. Vote against this 160 some odd £1,000 breakaway. It is obscene. And that's the best word for it. It's obscene. But your lot came up with it. So, of course, you'll use that as some sort of classification. It's got the support of the MPs. Yeah, because you're voting it to yourselves. I can give you a few other sectors where you might vote and who have work harder than you and have more impact than you. But will you pay any attention? No, you will not. It's 9 o'clock. I got to go. And so I should. I was just getting to the point where I probably would upset some people in Westminster. Oh, dearie, dearie me. Dearie, dearie, dearie me. Right, we'll be back at 9:30 with another episode of the Tiny Town, bloody past of a tiny town. And then we have Liza Page with her alternative views on the world domination and what's happening to it. It's interesting stuff. You might not agree, probably won't agree. You probably have all sorts of reasons as to say why she's stark staring mad. But it doesn't matter. She's a lady of conviction. And those are the voices we should be hearing. And actually, if there is a lesson to be learned by our leaders, by our members of parliament, by our senators, by our lords and ladies, it's that we are expecting governance with a sense of duty, not governance with stuff it in my pocket as hard and fast as you can. That is not good enough anymore, and you're being found out. Yeah, I quite enjoyed that. All right. We'll be back in 9:30.